Hello, everyone. Hi, Ollie.
Hi, nice to see you again, Marcos.
Likewise, likewise. Okay, so we're doing the third or fourth, I think, fourth of our Mars videos this time. We've already done a video on Mars in general, and we've done Mars in the fixed signs, Mars in the mutable signs, and now we're doing Mars in the cardinals. So, what we're just going to be talking about today is specifically what sort of medical effects, what physical effects might be expected when Mars goes through the four so-called cardinal or movable signs, those being Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And specifically, if anyone has their sun sign, their zodiac star sign in any of those signs, because they may be perhaps on balance more likely to experience those effects. And we might touch on moon signs briefly as well as we're going through. So just as a preamble, if you're not sure what any of this is about, go and have a listen to our Mars video. We did a whole video on Mars in general. But Mars is what's interesting about these four signs is Mars is really strong in two of them and really weak in another two. So Mars is going to be very strong in Aries, which is one of Mars's domiciles, where it's said to be in rulership traditionally, and in Capricorn, where it's said to be in exaltation. And then Mars is going to be rather debilitated in Cancer, where it's in fall, and in Libra, where it's in detriment. So the effects of that are that they may show up in on balance. Mars in Cancer and Mars in Libra may on average produce more health problems than Mars in Aries and Mars in Capricorn. The other interesting thing about that, of course, is that when we're talking about sun signs, people, again, this is law of averages and it will vary, but people who are sun in Aries or sun in Capricorn might have less difficulty with Mars going through these signs than people with sun in Cancer and sun in Libra, because there will be, when Mars aspects the sun in Cancer or Libra, there will be what I would call a rejection there, because Mars will sort of reject the sun in those signs, versus when when the sun rather is in Aries or Capricorn, Mars will receive the sun. So that's this idea that when when a planet is really likes being in a sign, when it's strong in a sign, it will pay host to or look after a planet in that sign where it's strong, which I know you know, Ollie, but I just thought I'd give that a preamble for the viewer and listener. So and then final point, just we mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning. Traditionally, Mars was easier to handle, or on average better behaved at night, meaning for people born at night, like literally when it was dark, when the sun's below the horizon, in those people's charts, Mars on average is a bit less problematic than for people with Mars born during the day. That's the whole idea of sect. Now, obviously, that's not taking into account house rulership and all the other variables that you look at when you're interpreting a chart, but just on the whole. And as you know, Ollie, my hypothesis there is sect is very much to do with consciousness because it's about light. Yep. So if you're born at night, you're kind of a bit more aware of how Mars things can come up for you and able to steer it. You can sort of like, you tend to get less hit or impacted by things like accidents and fevers and infections on average than people born during the day do. Absolutely. The converse being true of Saturn.
And taking everything else into account.
Yeah, exactly. It's as always in astrology, there's always a big asterisk implied with everything, but this is just in general. So, and we're only going to be able to do it in general, of course, because we're not doing individual chart readings here. These are just general interpretive suggestions. So should we start as we're recording this? Mars is in Libra. It's just gone into Libra a week or so ago, so we might as well start with Mars in Libra. Do you want me to go first, Ollie, or do you want to
go for Libra? I'll do Capricorn.
Okay, fab. So Mars in Libra. Well, Libra traditionally couple of things, lots of things associated with Libra, but Libra rules anatomically. The region of the body was the kidneys and the lower back. And Libra, being an air sign, was also associated with the blood. One can think of the circulation in general, but blood inside the body where it's supposed to be. So Mars can indicate in Libra, can broadly indicate injuries or inflammation in the back, or to the kidneys, and also infections, because Mars in the air signs in general, that was a combination that in traditional astrology was said to suggest putrefaction. This idea, because Mars is often infections and inflammation, and heating of the blood, which was hot and moist, might tend to cause infections. So we're looking at perhaps a little more risk of infection, particularly perhaps airborne infection, and also injury to the back or kidneys in general with Mars in Libra. Now, if we're looking at the different sun signs or so-called star signs, just one more thing, Mars in Libra in general, because Mars in Libra is the 12th sign from Scorpio, which is the other sign Mars rules traditionally, could also potentially indicate injuries to the feet, bizarrely, in Libra. So different sun signs. So people with, let's start with Aries sun. Mars is opposing that sun. So as we talked about in the video, Mars in general, Sun, Mars are more just generically inclined to sort of cardiac stuff, so heart stuff, like at the maximum, like heart attack or strokes or that kind of thing. Now that's a possibility, but that's the very extreme end. So, but somebody with, so Sun in Aries, you might have with Mars in Libra, all the stuff we just talked about, kidneys, lower back, feet, blah, 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 infections, might also be heart stuff, potentially at worst, might also be heat in the head, so sort of headaches, particularly associated with circulation, maybe a rise in blood pressure due to stress or confrontation. Also, the sun in Aries is that Aries is the 9th sign from Leo, I think, which the sun rules, right? So that would indicate the potentially the hips and the sacrum. So it could be inflammation there. Now there is a reception there. Mars is receiving the sun in Aries, so that will mitigate. So it's more like a transient wallop, you know, with the opposition. So a transient thing that that's most likely to get resolved, but may cause some problems through stress, mainly. Usually the Mars through stress or so perhaps verbal conflict. I forgot to say Mars in Libra is a very verbal Mars. So if you have conflict with Mars in Libra, it's likely to be gobby and humane sign as well. So it's less likely to be punchy and more likely to be shouty. Sun in Capricorn, again, there would be, well, let's go around the other way. So let's say zodiac sign Cancer, this may be a bit more problematic. So heart stuff as before, all the stuff with Mars in Libra. Sun in Cancer, though, might indicate some irritation or inflammation of the stomach, perhaps heartburn, but also because the sun in Cancer is the 12th sign from Leo. Cancer is the 12th sign from Leo, which the sun rules. So it could be inflammation with the feet. So double signification with foot stuff there, interestingly. So people with sun in Cancer, if they get some irritation with the Mars in Libra, may weirdly get some feet issues or any of the other stuff. All of this is very context dependent. Sun in Libra might get the strongest effect of this transit, and both Sun and Mars are not happy in Libra. So this may be the most tricky for people with Sun in Libra. Also, Libras generically don't particularly enjoy conflict or get on well with it. So there's an added sort of social stress there with Sun in Libra. All the stuff we talked about, lower back, kidneys, yada, yada, maybe cardiac stuff or circulatory stuff. What else? We'd also be looking at, it's the 3rd sign from Leo. So we might be looking at stuff with the arms, shoulders, or hands, inflammation in those parts of the body. And then finally, Sun in Capricorn, like Aries, Capricorn, Mars will look after the Sun in Capricorn a bit because it's the sign of Mars's exaltation. And it's only a square, so it doesn't have quite the same hostility as that opposition to Aries. So this is the least tricky, I would say, of all of these combinations. Your Capricorns might find the most positive potential out of this difficult transit, I would say, on balance. Although because Mars is so weak in Libra, it's unlikely to be super positive. But
it might be very grumpy sort of thing. So
yeah.
I was wondering, Marcos, obviously we're talking about the cardinal signs here, and cardinal signs tend to be initiating, but not necessarily very long lasting. Do we see a bit of that in all these 4 signs when the diseases they'll come along? Mars is obviously quite acute sort of a planet as opposed to Saturn, which is more.
Yes, thank you, Ollie. I totally forgot to add that to my preamble, of course. We've talked about fixed signs which are long lasting relatively, the mutable signs which come and go. And as you say, the cardinal and movable signs, their main feature is that they're quick. So it absolutely doubles up, as you say, on that Mars quick, which is interestingly, I think, why Mars has strength in more of the cardinal signs. There's two cardinal signs. It's one of the fixed signs and two cardinals, than any other sort of triplicity or quadruplicity, is it? Quadruplicity. Anyway, so yes, quite right. So Mars in these signs
It might
would
be
tend to,
flare up of something. It's something
yes,
again that's been, oh God, my my rheumatism in my joint very flared up, very hot, but it might not last
acute.
very long.
Acute is the key word here. Absolutely. So it's acute. So these might be very sudden, painful attacks of something. The plus side is that they won't necessarily last long. You
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
whereas as you may find in the fixed sign, something that's triggered when Mars goes through a fixed sign might linger a bit longer than you want it to. Through a mutable sign, it will come and go and change and mutate. Whereas in a movable sign, it might be a sudden bash over the head sort of thing, but at least it's not going to last very long. And we're saying this because we're focused, because obviously this channel is about medical astrology and plants. We're focusing on the negative. All these Mars transits can have some positive sides in terms of motivation. Again, go and watch the Mars video, give you
Yeah.
more info on that. But as you said, Capricorn was the last of the ones I was going to do with Mars from Libra. So as you mentioned, because Capricorn rules the knees, there could be some joint flare-ups, particularly in the knees or low legs. The sun in Capricorn, I think it's the sixth sign from Leo. So weirdly, there could be some issues with the guts or the gallbladder or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And then the usual stuff we talked about with Libra and with the sun Mars with the heart and all of that. And I think, with the Mars in Libra, as I mentioned, the main source of stress might be social and interpersonal here. You might find that it's stuff people say. You might encounter shouty people, and with Sun Mars, you might be issues with bosses. The Moon going through any of these signs is likely to be somewhat similar, but you're going to have more of an emphasis on. With the Sun Mars, it might be more, you might have external conflict with bosses or authority figures, or maybe you'll feel your own authority is being challenged. With the Moon, you may feel it's more of an emotional upset. You might just get really angry and upset internally. There may also be conversely some problems with more likely female figures, or caretakers in some way. And the issues may more generically affect stomach, guts, and also I find things with the Moon Mars, stuff like migraine, cyclical issues, migraines and bladder stuff,
And
stuff that
again,
might tend to recur. So migraines
goes
and
back to the anger and
cystitis or whatever.
again, cardinal sign. So these things might come out of nowhere. It's suddenly
Yeah.
like boss loses your temper, or his temper with you, or you lose your temper with the boss. Suddenly, bang, but not necessarily very long lasting
Mm.
sort of thing.
Absolutely. And as we talked about in the Sun Mars video in general, the remedies for this are twofold. One, in astrology, if you know something's coming up of this nature, if you know your chart, you can see it, then just make sure you're also paying attention to your mood and to your trigger points. So if you are triggered, just make sure you take a deep breath, you step back a bit. You can't always control what happens, but you do have a modicum of control, at least, over how you respond to it. So step back if you can. And then we talked a bit just generically about Sun Mars remedies in the Mars video. So we won't belabor that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ollie, do you want to do the Mars in Capricorn? Interesting
Yes,
Mars.
we've done quite a lot already.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, these things will get less and less as we go through the video.
Okay,
But yeah.
so as I said, Mars in Capricorn, it's particularly for Sun there. It's the Sun so Mars is very strong in Capricorn. It's in its exaltation, and we're looking at things that particularly the bones, the joints, especially the knees. We could probably, would you include the tendons and skin there as a Saturn rulership, or not so much? But I think
A little
basically
bit.
the bones, joints, stuff like that. And we mentioned, um, and particularly Mars, we're looking at sort of I think because of this initiating thing, it's going to be stuff that we're looking at that's more acute. So be particularly careful of connective tissue damage in the joints. It's not going to be a
Yeah.
slow osteoarthritis. It's going to be
Particularly the knees, right? Particularly
things
the
like
knees and
the
hamstrings and that sort of
tendons
area.
sort of things. That
Yeah.
sort of stuff to look out for. And again, I mean, Capricorn's very earthy signs. That's kind of work. So again, just again, not on the so medical side, but it is medical, obviously. Don't work too hard. It's often going to be suddenly like, oh, I've got to get up this morning and like really like push myself. And that's you've got to be careful of.
Yeah, that's an issue. I think with Mars in Capricorn, it's a good Mars, right? But particularly if you're born during the day or whatever, Mars in Capricorn is the grind. It's just the grind. And
Yeah.
so these people may just literally not know when to stop.
Well, and the classic thing is it's got the sun, they've got Mars, they're both hot and dry, burnout. That's what you want to avoid.
Totally. Yeah. And I'd point on that because it's the Mars in Capricorn, it's the third sign from
It is.
Scorpio, shoulders, arms, and hands. And to your point, Ollie, you're saying, oh, could it be joint? So yeah, it might be joints, not just the knees and
Yeah.
that Capricorn area, but that area too. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The axial skeleton could be,
Axial skeleton.
sorry, appendicular skeleton. I misspoke.
Yeah.
Yes. yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So all those things, and again, Mars breakages stuff of the skeleton. So yeah,
Yeah. Which of the, so just briefly,
so,
the other zodiac
yeah.
signs, we don't need to repeat what they all, the sun in those signs,
No.
body parts might do, but
Looking,
which
so
might be the most tricky, do you think?
I think the opposition in particularly in Cancer could be a difficult one. Mars isn't very happy there anyway.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
so, again, I think with all the things we've talked about, stomach and the breast and digestion, ulcers, gastritis, reflux, stuff like that.
Hmm.
That and yeah, sort of inflammation and because Mars rules a bile, doesn't it? So and that's a
Yeah.
thing. So we'd be looking particularly sort of information. I'd look out for all those things. And again, stuff that comes on quickly. It's not like, oh, I've got this grinding indigestion that's been killing me for months. It's like, oh my God, I've got
Although you might have an acute on chronic. So if you're prone
yes,
to,
absolutely, yes.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
if you've been on omeprazole for a while and you haven't had to take it because
yeah,
your stomach's fine, or you've had an ulcer in the past but it's okay, you might
yeah,
just get this bout of intense work
yeah.
and where you're just going and going, and then suddenly that it's back on. Maybe you're just drinking 20 cups of coffee a day or something to keep going,
And look out for the emotional stuff with Cancer as well. So
Yeah.
suddenly layers of feeling very difficult emotions, etc., all
It's
coming from other people.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to push through and
Yeah,
just be stoic about stuff with Mars in Capricorn, or you just have some tyrannical situation at work where you just can't avoid it. But
yeah.
you yourself, with the sun in Cancer, are feeling like you just want to wrap yourself up in a bit of a blanket and sort of like have a day in front of the telly or something, and it's just not possible. So it's that kind of thing
Absolutely.
could
And
be
obviously we've got the
possible.
square to Libra. Again, the sun's not very happy there, as we mentioned
No.
before. So it's going to be quite difficult too. It's not going to be as intense. And as Marcos said, kidneys, lumbar back.
All I mean, we've talked about all those regions
Kidney stones
before,
would be
so I
a
think,
classic, like suddenly
oh
like, oh,
yeah.
kidney stones have come back sort of thing. That'd be a really Marsy sort of.
Yes, because
And
it's more
stone
more
is
the pain of
Capricorn.
it. Yeah, sort of
And,
acute.
and we could, if you wanted to be a bit symbolic, say, Capricorn's all about Earth, and the stone is Earth sort of thing. I quite like that sort of symbolism.
Yeah,
But that, yeah, and also obviously Libra air sign, so it could be like looking at tensions in the mind as well and things like that. But again, coming from work, moon in Capricorn, so problems in that area.
yeah. Mars and Capricorn. Yeah. What about Aries? I think that's an interesting one because both of those planets would be very strong.
Yes.
So yeah,
But it's an odd one, isn't it? Because in there'd be. Let me just visualize this, and obviously the sun's very happy in it, so it's got the rulership. And again, it's a lot will depend on what relationship in your chart you
yeah,
have to basically Mars and the Sun, and of course Capricorn, and what else is around, because there's a lot of power in that square.
yes.
And so it could be good, could be bad. So,
Mm.
but
It's an
again,
inch. It's yeah.
I'd
Sorry.
look out for anger issues because like Aries obviously is the classic sign of like the head and being all the blood rushing to the head,
Mm.
getting and again this thing of I think burnout again is a problem with that as well. I know not a lot of Arians are very ambitious.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but yeah, it's an interesting one. And as Marcus has said already, headaches, migraines, blah. Eye strain, nosebleeds, indeed, of course.
Yeah, I mean, like you could get all sorts of things. Like, so you could get like burst blood vessels in the eye,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something like that. With that combo. Or yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is an interesting one, that one, because both planets are very well dignified. So, like, things to look out for. So, if you were born at night, for example, that might work out a bit more favorably, particularly if
yeah,
you had a
yeah,
Mars ruled chart, if you had Aries or Scorpio rising, possibly. Um, that's one factor to look out for. But it is an interesting one because Mars would be said with that square, from the square Mars in Capricorn to Sun in Aries. Mars would be in the overcoming position traditionally. Mars would be in the
yes,
10th
yes, yes.
sign from Aries.
Yeah.
So to me, that would, because that traditionally wouldn't be so good. It's better to have the sun in the overcoming sign
Yeah,
from, but obviously we have this interesting situation here where if you've got Mars in Capricorn, the sun to be in the overcoming position would be in Libra, which Mars really doesn't like. So that's not good at all. So,
no,
so the other way around, you've got the reception, which is very good. So to
yeah,
me, I think that would very much depend, as you said, Ollie, on where the sun and Mars were in your birth chart. And one just shorthand thing you could look at is the sect of your chart. If you're born at night, it might work out a bit more favorably because Mars is in the overcoming position in that square. So you'd
yeah,
kind of want to have a bit more conscious use of that Mars, if you like.
absolutely.
Um, Otherwise, you're perhaps leaning more towards burnout rather than a productive period of stress, which is how that could come out, with both planets in good dignity.
Agreed.
Um,
So who's
cool.
next?
I think we're on to Aries now. So I mean, we've covered most of these now.
Covered
So
most of that,
yeah,
yes.
we'll just briefly describe Mars in Aries, and then which of the other sun signs would go on better with it. Um, so yeah, so Mars in Aries is dignified, so it's very, very good. The kind of issues that the kind of issues that you might find here are really issues of overheating, like literally just
Yeah,
putting on a sprint and tearing something, or getting a rapid fever, or causing yourself an injury through rushing,
yeah,
that sort of thing, or cutting yourself, like bashing
nice.
your head,
Yeah,
like the kind of injuries like where you just, like, what kids do all the time, where they run into stuff and smack their head on stuff. That's
yeah.
a very Mars and Aries thing.
You walk through a door and hit your head on the door frame would be a classic.
Yes, yeah, totally,
Oh,
exactly that kind of thing. Very sudden, because Aries rules the head. Mars and Aries, so injuries to the head possible. It's also from Scorpio. I think it would be the sixth sign from
yeah.
Scorpio. So you could be looking at issues with the gallbladder here, particularly, or small
Yes.
intestine.
Oh, God.
So
Oh,
gallbladder
that's
inflammation possible.
yeah,
So in general, Mars with the Sun, if your Aries Sun, this is an interesting one because, again, yeah, we could be looking at things like stroke or heart attack at the worst, but there's a mutual reception here. Mars and the Sun in this sign like each other. So particularly for those born at night or with the Sun and or Mars in a favorable position in their birth
yeah.
chart, then, and for favorable position, you might need to study some astrology or listen to more of our videos, or do both, or perhaps
In the
study
first,
astrology with us. Have a look at our school in the link
definitely.
below. So
You need to look at all the aspects to them as well and see,
yes,
what the other planets are doing. So yeah, well worth your effort. But yeah,
yes, totally. But I mean, but because they have that mutual reception, there is more likelihood that this could be skewed towards a sort of positive period of busyness. But there is also that the possibility of overheating, of excess type A behavior,
yes,
where you're just rushing and your blood pressure goes up and you do yourself an injury, and that might be like heart or stroke, or injury or something like that at worst. But yeah, so, or gallbladder stuff or whatever, the stuff that we've mentioned. But in general, this leans towards, out of all the ones we've talked about in this video, Mars in Aries with Sun in Aries, transiting natal Aries Sun, is the most constructive in general, more so in
Agreed.
a night chart generally. Cancer, it would be tricky. Libra, it would be tricky. All of the same kind of conditions we talked about. But this time Mars is in Aries, so we're leaning more towards stuff to do with the head, particularly, and the gallbladder, possibly, as we've mentioned. Yeah, Mars in Cancer, we've got the square, and I think Aries is, yeah, Mars would be, if Mars is in Aries, it's overcoming the Sun in Cancer, so it's a tricky position. So Sun in Cancer peeps would find this a bit stressful, like they're being, like Mars in Capricorn, they're just on the grind all the time. They're being, they have to work through a deadline and they just got all the work to see. Mars in Aries, they're just being made to rush, or for some reason they're just like that. They're being forced to rush at a pace which feels totally unjustifiable to them. They kind of want to take things
And
easy.
possibly very unexpectedly as well. It's suddenly like
Yes.
we've changed the deadline from a month to a week.
Yes, yeah. Or they're dealing with like people they think are being super unreasonable, like just
Exactly.
unreasonably combative. Or maybe it's something more benign, like they have to enter a tournament or something, and they're literally like some kind of sports event where like they're really, but the other team are hyper competitive. So there's various possibilities, but it's that kind of sudden attacks of kind of like activity, a flurry of activity that could be overwhelming. And then for Mars, for Sun in Libra, as I think you probably all guessed by now, it's the opposition. Mars doesn't like things in Libra, so that will be quite stressful too. And
Yes.
rather similar to the converse, this might be social stress, but this time it's going to be again that sort of like being forced to rush or encountering lots of competition, encountering a lot of a sudden flurry of activity or competitiveness from outside, which causes the Libra person to feel extremely discomforted and harried and harassed. And the Sun in Libra might respond, all else being equal, with trying to speak up in some way about the injustice, but because Libra will do that, but the Sun in Libra being in detriment, it might either over egg the pudding and sort of try and compensate by making itself sound too important, or it'll end up like not being able to advocate for itself. It can suffer from that kind of stress. The Sun in Cancer is liable to, I mean, if we're stereotyping here, just not say anything. It'll try and retreat. But with these Mars transits, you can't retreat from that situation. It'll either be so sudden that it's just there in your face, or it's something that's like just for a few days while Mars is transiting the Sun. It might just be a few days of intense stress or busyness from some outside source or some internal source, but usually with an opposition, it's going to be something out there. And then Sun in Capricorn is probably going to find that Mars in Aries, much like the Sun in Aries and Mars in Aries, somewhat potentially favorable. Degree of stress, much as we talked about with the converse, it's really going to depend where Sun and Mars are in your chart. But in this case, the Sun would be in the overcoming position. It would be 10 signs away, which would be better. And there's a mutual reception because the Sun is in the sign of Mars's exaltation. Mars is in the sign of the Sun's exaltation. So this is like the square is going to give some stress or some friction. But what this is like this is the Sun in Capricorn in general, sort of can forge an identity through sort of just hard work, working towards goals gradually. And
I would say anything that, it's, again, you can't say for sure, but
no.
it'd be likely that anything that happened is more likely to be self-inflicted because it's actually a very dynamic sort of aspect between the two. And so there's a chance of just overdoing it, basically.
Yes. So again, a very similar thing to what we exactly. I totally agree, Ollie. So the chances you said before might be of burnout or just watch the potential to overdo it. But much like Sun with Mars in Aries, this Sun in Capricorn, Mars in Aries, if Mars is transiting Aries and natal Sun in Capricorn, has the potential to be quite constructive, a sort of constructive few days of busyness or conflict that can help you on a psychological level to sort of positively reshape your identity. Maybe you can assert yourself in a way that's uncomfortable but necessary, or get some things done but you just got to watch out for burnout or for overstepping or for
I mean, don't get in a sort of deadlifting competition with someone. You
yeah,
might
yeah, yeah.
pop
The, the
something.
the danger with the Mars transits is always getting too hot under the collar, basically,
Yeah.
on an internal level. That's always the vibe, isn't it? So it's just being aware of that. Um, yeah, I think was there anything else that you thought about to add to any of this,
No,
Ollie?
no, I think that's pretty comprehensive.
Okay,
You
excellent.
get it?
Well, if anyone's if you're wanting thinking, so what do I do about any of this? As we mentioned, partly it's knowing the timing when this stuff's coming up, and we would suggest you go and just watch our video on Mars in general if you haven't done so already, because we talk a bit about some general remediation for these transits, which is just sort of doing stuff to cool you down and to step back from that Mars energy a little bit, to temper it, which would be easier to do, which may come more naturally to those, as we mentioned several times already, born at night, with Mars transits. But you can always do these things consciously, and in fact, that's the whole point. I would say of studying astrology from a medical point of view is to know when these things are coming up, and then to have just that little bit of consciousness in your head that enables you, when stuff hits the fan, to go, okay, I knew what this was. I knew this was coming in some form. So now I know, at least in theory, how I need to react to this. And that can actually, it may not turn a wholly unpleasant situation into a party, but it might be enough to, pull your feet away from the fire, if you're in a tricky situation. So yeah. And at the best, it can help you completely avoid any difficulty and maximize any positive potential. So right. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Ollie.
See you next
Thanks,
time.
everyone. See you all next time. Thanks. Bye.